In this particular part of the video series on VIN history reports, I'm going to talk about a very important topic which is called salvage titles. Now, you may be wondering, what is a salvage title? A salvage title typically comes from an insurance company because a car that went through a claim wasn't worth fixing. In other words, the cost to repair the car was more money than it was to replace the car. So the insurance company declares it a total loss. At that point, the cars can be auctioned off as salvage. And what that means is the person buying these vehicles have options. They could buy the vehicles and use them for parts, or they can buy the vehicles with the intention to rebuild the vehicle. If they decide to rebuild the vehicle that was a total loss, and let's say the loss came from either an accident, a flood, if it was in a flood like a hurricane and so forth, the person can buy these vehicles from the insurance company and they can rebuild the vehicle. Then the vehicle should be inspected for safety. When it passes inspection from the DMV, it now becomes a rebuild title. And a rebuild title is totally different, of course, than a salvage title, because with a rebuild title, you can now register, insure, and drive the car and even sell the car. So that's what a salvage title is. Now we got to cover the nuances that are involved in that title. I noticed something very interesting looking through Marketplace to buy a vehicle. A lot of times I'll shop Marketplace on Facebook and I'll look at vehicles and I'll see a late model vehicle that is literally has a fantastic price on it. And I'll read through the description, and in the description I see something called, guess what? Salvage title. And the problem I have with that is the person selling a vehicle as a salvage vehicle, just like an insurance company would. So what's wrong with that? Well, the fact that it's a salvage title and not a repair title tells me one of two things. Either the person selling the vehicle tried to repair it and couldn't get it to pass inspection, or they bought it cheap enough that they can turn it over as another salvage vehicle and make the profit on that. So on Facebook, if you see a vehicle that says salvage title and you're interested in buying it, I would ask the seller this very important question. Why are you selling it as a salvage title and not a rebuild title? Because a salvage title in South Carolina, for example, cannot be registered. It has to be a rebuild title. And that'll tell you a lot. Now, some people will drive a salvage title vehicle, and to me, that's a very dangerous thing to do. So buyer beware. If it says salvage title and they show you the title and on the title it says salvage, I would stay away. You want a rebuild title at the bare minimum. And even then, there's nuances which we're going to cover next. A lot of times when you see a rebuild title, you would assume that the car is okay. Well, now we have a new issue. And the new issue is, let's say that it had frame damage. And the person that took the car and repaired it or had it repaired didn't have it done properly. So the frame damage is not exactly correct. This leads into a new problem. And that problem is, if the frame is still bent or out of a line, it could lead to major tire wear. It could lead to something called dog tracking, where the car drives down the road at an angle but looks like it's going straight. And it can cause a lot of suspension problems. So just because a car has a rebuild title on it doesn't mean that it's been rebuilt correctly. And once again, if you see these issues in the rebuild title, when you examine the car, you see problems with it like this, to me, it's not worth it. It's time to walk away and find something else. Spend a little more money on a vehicle that doesn't have damage, and I think you'll be much more happier than if you try to save money by buying a salvage title car that was rebuilt. Which Brings us to the next issue, which is flood damage. A lot of times when there's a hurricane, a lot of cars will be submerged. And if they're submerged in salt water, for example, they're on the coast, for example, and the hurricane came in and the waters rose up fairly high, then the car itself gets submerged. And the insurance company would typically call that a total loss. And the reason they do that is because when you submerge electronic components, when you submerge wiring, especially in salt water, the wiring can corrode over time. So even though the vehicle, once it's all dried out and cleaned up, it can cause new problems down the road with the wires actually falling apart and crumbling because they had intrusion of salt water. So once again, this is another buyer beware. I would not buy a vehicle that was in a flood. That is a very bad decision. And by the way, there's also health issues, which you probably didn't realize. A car that was in a flood, let's say, and has water under the carpets or in the trunk, and that water sits for any length of time, can develop mold under the carpet. You wouldn't see it, but it would grow, and that mold would grow to a point where it could cause some health issues. So, looking at your history report, if you see that the car was in a flood, to me that's a big red flag, and I would stay away. Finally, we need to talk about the financial issues of buying a rebuild title or a salvage title vehicle. When you purchase one of these vehicles, you may find out that a lot of insurance companies will not insure them. They're scared of them. They're afraid that they're insuring something that could be dangerous. So that's number one red flag. Number two is a lot of banks will not even finance a rebuild title or a salvage title vehicle, once again for the same reason, because it's a liability. And the final thing is, when you go to sell the vehicle, say you don't like the car anymore or you want to move up, you're not going to get the money that you think you'll get for it. It'll be way below market value. So once again, this is an area that you really need to understand, that salvage titles and rebuild titles are something that if you need just transportation and you need it short term and you don't care if you get your money back, it might be a good option for you. But personally, I would stay away from them. And finally, there's also something called title washing, where a vehicle is moved from one state to another state to hide an issue that happened in that state. For example, a car from Florida might have been in a hurricane and submerged, and they want to create a clear title, so they register it in a different state. And it takes time for that information to catch up to the vehicle. So, here we go again. If it's a salvage title or a rebuild title, the history report will show you if it's a salvage title. Not necessarily if it's been rebuilt, but it will show you if it's a salvage title, based on the accident report and the insurance reports. So it's very critical that you always check the VIN history, the vehicle's identification number history, because this will reveal so much that you couldn't find just by looking at a vehicle that looks nice. So once again, check that out. And by the way, to get a VIN history report, I would suggest you go to either Carfax.com or CarValueScout.com and check out their offers for the VIN history reports. And it's something that I believe I would never buy a vehicle without that VIN history report in front of me, because it tells me so much. And this is just the title section we're talking about now. We're going to move and the actual salvage section, but in a later video, we're going to move from there to some more things that the VIN history report reveals, which is so important. We'll talk about recalls, for example, and there'll be another video on the mileage, which is critical too. So with that being said, thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something from this. I think learning about salvage titles is very important for anybody shopping for a car. And my wife was even amazed when she went through this video and said, wow, I learned a whole lot. So thank you for watching. And If you like the video, subscribe and like it, or you don't have to. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just trying to help people to get a better deal on a used car. And I have 20 years experience as an auto body technician, so I know a little bit about what's going on when it comes to these salvage titles. Once again, thanks again, and see you in the next video.